associate at CMS, and today I will be talking to you about crypto law in practice, tokens, protocols, and jurisdictions. So today I hope that this presentation will give you a practical account of the state of crypto law in the UK today, and explain some of the key things that you need to know when you're picking a crypto-friendly jurisdiction to kind of set up your crypto business in. So I'll give a brief discussion on the state of crypto law in the UK, but focusing on where it's going, so the incoming regulation and recent significant developments. I'll then set out some of the key legal and commercial considerations that you should be thinking of when you decide what jurisdiction you want and when you're determining what is a crypto-friendly jurisdiction. I'll then look at two specific examples, being when you're launching a token and when you're launching a decentralized protocol. So I'll give a brief introduction to myself before diving into this. I am one of about 10 crypto lawyers in CMS. We work across the UK, and we have and the UAE now, but we have colleagues across Europe that we frequently work with on cross-border matters. I graduated from the University of Edinburgh with my law degree in 2021 and my master's in 2022. Initially, I wanted to be an insolvency lawyer, but decided crypto looked a bit more fun after looking into it, even though it's not that high a bar. Since then, I joined CMS, and I was lucky enough to be able to complete all of my training in the crypto team. So now, since qualifying, all we do is crypto every day. We look at everything from launching your business and structuring your business to tokenizations and everything in between. So I'll move on to give you a brief account of crypto law in the UK. As you may be aware, there's a lot of potential applications of the law to crypto assets. A whistle-stop tour of some of them. AML law attempts to stop businesses from facilitating crime. Security and data law aims to protect customer data and stop businesses from losing or misusing it. And consumer protection law does what it says, it protects consumers. For today, I am going to focus on the latest and most significant developments in crypto asset law within the UK, being the financial promotion regime and the incoming regulation, which is set to take full effect in 2026. So starting with the financial promotion regime, or the FinProm regime. So in short, what it does is it limits what products and services can be communicated to UK persons or retail persons within the UK, and how those communications can be made. It's been in place for a while in respect of traditional financial instruments and services, but in 2023 they extended it to qualifying crypto assets, which I'll touch on in a second. It's essentially a general prohibition that means that you cannot advertise or promote your products and services unless you satisfy certain conditions. As I mentioned, they've extended it to qualifying crypto assets, which, as you can see from the slide, is defined as any fungible cryptographically secured representation of rights. In practice, this means basically every single crypto asset, maybe apart from NFTs. It applies to communications that have effect or may have effect within the UK. It does not matter where you make the communication from. What's actually relevant is whether someone in the UK can access that communication. So a developer sitting in Singapore might tweet something on Twitter or X, and if that tweet has the ability to reach someone in the UK, it will be caught in the crypto asset FinProm rules. So intention doesn't matter either. It doesn't matter if you intended the communication to reach someone in the UK. What matters is whether it actually did. Communication also has a broad definition. It can even apply to websites. So just having your website available to people in the UK could be an issue. That's why a lot of companies are now geo-blocking the UK. So you might notice if you try and look at some crypto site online, you can't access it and you're firewalled. So what does happen if you breach the rules? well, you can get an unlimited fine, you can suffer reputational damage, and even imprisonment. Enforcement is governed by the FCA, or Financial Conduct Authority, and they issued 146 warnings within the first 24 hours, and in 2024 they claim to have had 20,000 promotions amended or withdrawn following their intervention. I mentioned that you can be imprisoned for making one of these communications. To date, we have had 0 big enforcement actions. Everyone's waiting for one because the general consensus is that the policy has not been implemented properly and that it was never intended to have this effect. But we'll see what happens. So I'm sure you're all still seeing crypto advertisements from things like Coinbase, Kraken. There are 2 ways that you can advertise or promote your crypto asset product. One is that you can become a firm authorized with the FCA. This can be a timely process, it can be quite costly. The alternative is that you can have your communication approved by an authorized person or firm. There are firms that are willing to do this, they'll partner with you. So based on this, you would think that the UK does not like crypto. It's very restrictive and essentially shuts retail consumers away from being able to access crypto. This, however, thankfully, is not reflective of the incoming regulation. The incoming regulation, I'm sure you're aware, it's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of consultation papers, discussion papers preparing for it. I'm going to give a brief explanation of the policy objectives and the main kind of legislative implementations rather than going into every single regulation. I think that'll be more interesting. So the key policy objectives are same risk, same regulatory outcome. What this means is that if a crypto asset activity, like staking or lending or custody, poses a similar or comparable risk to what a traditional financial instrument would, then it should be regulated in the same way to achieve the same outcome. This basically means that what the government is going to do is extend the current financial services regulation to apply to crypto assets, in effect. This is a different approach from what the EU has done, where they've created a completely kind of bespoke regime. The second policy objective is that the law should be proportionate and focused. The aim is to target real risks like investor harm or fraud, issues in custody, etc. So while minimizing the burdens on genuinely innovative and lower risk projects. They're basically wanting to regulate by risk rather than completely block out all technology to protect against the highest risks. The third and final policy objective is that the regulation should be agile and flexible. The government's aware that crypto moves very, very fast, and honestly, the last thing they want to do is have to redo all these regulations within a year as the market changes. So they've made sure that the regulation can evolve with the market. Now, they're going to introduce this in a phased approach. Currently, phase 1 is underway. It applies to fiat-backed stablecoins. And phase 2 is an extension of this to all other kind of crypto asset classes and activities. As you can see here, the full rules are going live in 2026, so we don't know the kind of practical implications of this yet, but based on the kind of policy objectives, it's looking a lot better than the FinProms did. So I will now move on to what you should be considering when choosing a crypto asset friendly jurisdiction. I'm sure you all know certain jurisdictions are typically deemed crypto friendly and therefore typically used to launch your token or your decentralized protocol. The jurisdictions that spring to mind might be the Cayman Islands, BVI, and as of recently, the UAE. However, one size does not fit all. So the focus of the next part of the presentation is going to be what makes a jurisdiction crypto-friendly. Hopefully this will elucidate some concepts that you can apply to your project when determining what jurisdiction would suit you. So when looking at crypto-friendly jurisdictions, you're not necessarily looking for the lightest touch law or the least regulation, contrary to what you might think. What you're looking for is where you can operate practically and with efficiency. Given time constraints, I'm going to focus on concepts rather than actual jurisdictional examples. So the first concept is the government's attitude. Ultimately, the substantive laws will affect whether it's even possible to launch your business there. If a government's really against crypto, they're not going to have laws that enable you to launch a business in crypto. So how can you tell what the government's attitude towards crypto is? You can look at the laws, but that can be a bit complicated. So you could also look for things like regulatory sandboxes. These are basically where businesses can test their products and services in a live market with real consumers, but under regulatory supervision. The UK actually has a lot of regulatory sandboxes that you may be familiar with, like the Digital Sandbox, that had some great success. The second concept that you're going to want to think about is legal certainty. This is basically, is the law clear and can you apply it with certainty? Do you know where you stand? Without clarity, even an apparently crypto-friendly or favourable law can become unusable. You can be left testing boundaries, trying to work out shifting guidance. It's also likely going to increase your legal costs, and you may be subject to litigation or enforcement actions. On the other side of this, a relatively restrictive law might actually be more user-friendly, clearer, and in the long run cause you less issues and be safer. The third and final consideration for today is the reputation of the jurisdiction. This is definitely from a practical perspective. You're going to want to look at a jurisdiction with a good reputation. This is going to instill confidence in your partners, your investors, even foreign regulators, and ultimately make it easier to obtain funding, encourage customer uptake, maybe even open bank accounts. So for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to apply these three concepts to the specific examples of launching a token and launching a decentralized protocol. Again, I'll be focusing on universal concepts rather than the jurisdictional nuance, because that will vary across every single different type of project and depending on the business. So, the first example, launching a token. Tokens are generally going to be regulated at least to some kind of degree. And when launching a token, one of the first questions you're going to ask is, what will my token be classified as? Whether a token is treated as a security token, a utility token, a stablecoin, or something entirely different will dictate the substantive law that applies. All jurisdictions will have some form of classification, although the nuance between them might vary. So this will affect your need for a white paper, your ease of fundraising, custody, how much disclosure you need to make, among other things. From this, you can see that it's very important. You need to know what your token is going to be. And here is where the concept of legal certainty comes in. What is universal is that clear substantive laws are key in ensuring that you can operate efficiently and with certainty in your structure. If you don't know whether your token is a security or utility token, you risk maybe not putting out a prospectus with your offering or offering to the wrong investor class, and then you can get into legal issues. We would recommend looking for well-defined classes if you're in doubt as to what your token is. The EU under MiCA has very good, well-defined buckets, although the legislation is new. The second point that you're going to want to consider is how easy is it going to be for you to raise funds. We often see projects in the kind of pre-IPO stage using simple agreements for future equity and simple agreements for future tokens. These are a good way to receive early investment and then in exchange for equity or token that's provided at a later date. Again, clear regulatory treatment is important here. You need to know kind of whether your SAFE or SAFT is going to be regulated. In the US, it's deemed an investment contract. And while there are exemptions that you can offer it to retail consumers, it makes it more difficult. So again, applying the concept of certainty, you need to be certain about what you are putting out and what the law around your fundraising agreements is going to be. From a practical side, the law governing your fundraising agreements should reflect a reputable jurisdiction. This will give investors confidence, it'll make them feel like they've got an adequate recourse should something go wrong. And the final consideration, although not the final consideration that you would think about launching a token, but for these purposes, the final consideration is where can you market your token? Where can you promote your token? You need to get people to buy it. So, as we've seen, financial promotions, it's going to be difficult to promote or market a token to the UK no matter where you set up. But each country will have different laws surrounding how you can promote and market your tokens. Additionally, advertising laws and standards are universal, so you'd want to look at that as well. Now, moving on to the, I'll give a quick summary of what I've just discussed. So, classification drives everything. From a practical point of view, there's always going to be some kind of regulation there. Security tokens typically have more, utility have less. But what you should be thinking about is how certain are you as to what kind of token you have. And then you want to be thinking from a fundraising point of view, how easy is it going to be for you to fundraise, how clear is the law, and do you really know what regulatory position or burdens you might be facing. So moving on to decentralized protocols. Now, I've put a definition of a decentralized protocol on the slide. I'm sure you all know what a decentralized protocol is. The reason I've done this is because in the UK, truly decentralized protocols are not currently within scope of regulation. This is not to say regulation, they'll never be in scope, and the government is considering regulating DeFi protocols, but they've recognised that they need a greater understanding of the space before they can apply regulation, knowing the difficulties of applying a traditional entity-based financial regulation to something that's open source, non-custodial, and without a central operator. This is a common theme across nearly all jurisdictions, including the US. There's a real need to understand the space more before they regulate. Now, I say it's only truly decentralized protocols. I've given the definition there, or a definition there. This is because the more centralized your protocol appears, the more likely it will be deemed within scope of the regulation. So the question becomes, who does what? If you have an identifiable controlling person or persons behind the protocol, then it may be treated in the same way as a centralized service. Same risk, same regulatory outcome. Regulators will often look behind the technology wrapper and ask the question, is there meaningful control in practice? If the answer is yes, they can and potentially will argue that the risk to consumers is indistinguishable from the traditional centralized exchanges or custodians, and you'll likely end up regulated. If the answer is no, there is no meaningful control in practice, then you're probably not regulated yet. So a lot of decentralized platforms will have some kind of front end or hosted API, a core team, or a fee-taking entity. All of these could be deemed identifiable persons. Liability can crystallize, and the regulator can use any human or corporate touch point as a hook to bring the activity within scope. So what can you do to make sure that you are truly decentralized if you're wondering whether your protocol actually is? You can map the architecture against the regulatory perimeter. You can check whether there are any centralized choke points. You can evidence decentralization. You can basically take a really deep look into your project and see, is there anywhere that appears centralized here? But there's an issue. The uncertainty will still persist. The definition of a decentralized platform that I gave is not necessarily a universally accepted definition. So even with all these steps, it is possible that regulation will attach to you unknowingly. Another issue we see with truly decentralized platforms is that they don't have what's called legal personality. Legal personality is what allows companies and entities to enter into contracts, hold assets. It also often comes with limited liability. If you don't have limited liability, then everyone in the project could become personally liable for any debts or liabilities that that protocol accrues. That's obviously an issue if you don't know whether you're going to be regulated or not. You don't want every developer or contributor to risk being personally liable. So you could use a legal wrapper. Now, a legal wrapper is an entity-like structure. It's not necessarily an entity in itself. It's often used not to own the protocol, but to provide a minimal point of contact with the legal world and improve the practical efficiency and operative side of the business. It can be used to help the protocol hold assets, enter contracts, and provide the limited liability for contributors. Now, this obviously does not address the issue of being truly decentralized. It might actually make you look more centralized, but it is a useful touch point for regulators while the uncertainty in the law persists and until decentralization is properly regulated within the UK. Some examples of legal wrappers would be a decentralized autonomous organization. This is a member-owned organization governed by rules encoded in smart contracts where members make collective decisions by voting. This has been a recognized structure in certain jurisdictions, including Wyoming and Switzerland. Naturally, it does make it look like the DAO is the controlling entity, and it may be easier to argue that it's not truly decentralized. Another issue with a DAO is that some jurisdictions see it to be akin to an unlimited partnership. This means it can open participants up to unlimited legal liability, and members could become responsible for the whole debts of the protocol personally. A potentially better structure is the Cayman BVI structure. This is incredibly popular with Web3 companies and often used for token launches due to the dual entity structure. What you have at the top, as you can see, is a Cayman Foundation company. These are non-shareholder, non-profit entities. So there's no people really behind it. They provide a neutral, purpose-driven vehicle that essentially insulates people from the risks I've discussed before. The operative side of the business is conducted through subsidiaries, typically BVI subsidiaries. Again, it doesn't support the truly decentralized argument, but it can help in holding property and protecting contributors and developers while the uncertainty persists and if you're really not sure whether you would fall within regulation or not. So, decentralized protocols are only within the regulatory scope, if they are truly decentralized, but it's difficult to pin down what that means. It can also make it hard to operate from a practical perspective. You can use legal wrappers if you're really not sure and want to protect yourself. But until the government is able to regulate decentralized protocols, this uncertainty will unfortunately persist. In the UK, they have recently closed a discussion paper to regulate decentralized protocols, but I don't believe that we've seen the outcome of that yet. But regulation is coming, essentially. So, what have I told you today? Crypto law is developing in the UK. Despite the financial promotion regime, the government does seem to have taken a relatively crypto-friendly approach to regulation. When looking for a crypto-friendly jurisdiction, you want to look at the government's attitude towards crypto and innovation. You want to look for legal certainty in the law, and you want to look at the reputation of the jurisdiction. When launching a token, certainty and clarity in token classification are key to understanding your position, and you need to be able to fundraise with relative ease. When looking at a decentralized protocol, you need to consider, are you truly decentralized? Looking at who does what. If you're concerned, you could consider structuring your business in a different manner. Thank you all for listening. I've put my LinkedIn and email address up there if you have any questions or would like to get in touch after this. And there's also the crypto team email there as well.